Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Aces 53 with Ed Parcaut and myself. Ed, how are you doing today?
Doing okay. They're working on my street, so if I drop, it was nice being here.
It was. You know what? We forgot to hide the guest. You know what? My fault. I was supposed to do
like
it.
the first time doing it in like 3 years, you know.
I know. I'm like, damn it. We forgot to put Jimmy away. So guess what? Y'all know who today's Joker is, and that is Jimmy Hayes Nelson. I met Jimmy at an event here in Dallas. Brad Summerock brought in him to be the MC, and we started talking about how important the job of an MC is. But what I learned over time is, in addition to being an MC, Jimmy's also a speaker. But what he really, truly is here to help do now is help people craft their message.
All right. So for most people, an MC is
like MC Hammer. You don't know?
No, you're assuming everybody knows the same acronym we're going to use.
I'm sorry. That is a very valid point.
I can have those pants in my closet. You don't know. Right. I mean, we're about the same age.
You do, but we won't talk about that.
For everyone who's ever been to an event and they have somebody who comes out, introduces the speaker, kind of fills the void between speakers and introduces them, like I said before, they're the ones that help the facilitator really run the show. They set the tone of the room. They get the room going in the morning. They sometimes have to recover if a speaker bombs. It's an interesting job because you are a pivotal part of the event itself. And what most people don't know is a lot of speakers get paid. They show up, they talk, they leave. They may be there in the green room for an hour. But an MC is part of the event. So they're in all the meetings ahead of time. They have to understand what's the goal, who's the audience, what do we want to create for them. And they're there from start to finish. So it's one of the most arduous jobs in an event industry is the person organizing it, because of course they have the pain of the checkbook and everything else, but it puts a lot of pressure on the MC to really pull that event off.
So the master of ceremonies is what we're talking about. The MC.
Yes. There you go.
We got it finally out, the acronym that was trying to get you to explain.
I did not know that. Describing my job than I do. So I may take this, write my bio off of this audio now.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny because I did not know master of ceremony because I've always seen MC as EMCEE. So yeah, I did not.
You can write it either ways. But yes, master of ceremonies is where that comes from.
Did not know that. See, learn something new every day.
Every day.
Trying to help everybody understand because everybody's like, MC, what does MC think?
Yeah. Well, I did see Jimmy did a post over the weekend about being at, I guess you were the voice of God at an event also.
Did you just well, that was part of my job. So I have been an MC for, if people have watched the Aspire tour for about the past year, that's Andrew Cordell and Eddie Wilson, and they jump from city to city once a month. And there are a few speakers that they have at every event, but then they bring in these huge celebrities. And it really is like a personal development, business development type event. And so at this particular one, they had people like Hulk Hogan and David Goggins and John Gordon and Shaquille O'Neal. And on my Instagram post, I was talking about part of an MC's job outside of all the things you just described, going out there, setting up the event, interacting with the audience, edifying each speaker, is occasionally you will have to do from the back what they call a VOG, or a voice of God. And that's usually, hey, in 5 minutes, we're going to get started, get back to your seats. It's a little bit of housekeeping. And in this particular time, it was towards the end of the event. They had just made an offer. So the other thing I feel like I specify in as an MC is events that have a high ticket offer at the end of the event. Is I feel like I'm part of the sales process, because as the MC, I structure myself as the audience on stage. Hey, audience, you and I are going to take this journey together. We're going to learn from all these experts, right? I'm going to come out. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to get them so excited about the speaker before they hit the stage. So, Brian, you know this, right? As a speaker, if I can do half your job for you before, why they should be so lucky to get from you. He's hard to get. He's super busy. Lean forward, take notes. And they're already chomping at the bit before you come on, right? You're going to have more success. On the backside of that, I do what I call being the human highlighter. Hey, backstage, these are the things, these are my takeaways. And then throughout the event, I will pepper in stories of my own entrepreneurial journey, right? I share my story about being a former 100-pound overweight 3-time college dropout. The first time I got to an event like that, the first time I was nervous about investing in a coaching program or a mastermind. So hopefully what I'm doing is, by the time I have a different trust between me and the audience, by the time we get to the end of the event or the offer. They happened to get this offer towards the end, and they were wrapping up the entire day with Shaquille O'Neal. But what they did is, it was really interesting. The minute you make an offer and people go to tables, trying to get that audience back in seats is a little bit like herding cats at times. And so they kept saying, hey, go do another voice of God. We don't want people to leave. They don't want to miss Shaq. And so that's what I was doing. I was backstage looking at a monitor, trying to use my biggest, best announcer voice. And about that time, I felt two giant hands come over my shoulders, dig into my neck. And I kind of crumbled to the ground. And it was just Shaq messing with me. And he just looked at me. He's like, I just wanted to see if you could work while being distracted. And we just kind of hit it off from there. But you're right. As an MC, you have to learn to pivot and just kind of go with the flow no matter what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And what was your first MC job?
Oh my gosh. So my background, just as a public speaker in general, was with Beachbody, the P90X Insanity in-home fitness people, right? I lost 100 pounds with them as a customer. And that kind of re-sparked, I was an actor as my background. It kind of re-sparked my acting career here in Dallas. And I moved to New York City. And while I was in New York City, Beachbody shifted their model from just being the infomercial company to an affiliate network marketing company. And that was kind of my first foray into business. And we would do these events. And when they would want somebody to go on stage and share their story or kick things off, I ended up with a mic in my hands. And sometimes it was used 5, 10, 15, 20 people to start. But I did have a bit of an acting background. So I had a bit of stage presence. And I didn't know, 17 years later, I would be in front of these crowds of, 5, 10, 20,000 people trying to do the same thing. But that's really where it started, was just me sharing my story of my own personal journey with fitness. And it has led to a bunch of other industries and utilizing those skill sets of acting, of improv classes, of being on camera. And I had no clue that season of my life was going to be preparing me for this.
Mm-hmm. It's so sad what happened to Tony Horton.
Oh, when he got sick? Yeah, he's better now, dude. That dude looks rock and roll. He's my dad's age.
But he went from what he was to how skinny he was, and then
Good dude. Well, he and I used to do, funny story. When I was living in New York City, I was just sharing this event. I was just in LA with David Meltzer, who was doing a collaboration event with Dane Cook, and Forbes Riley was there, who used to do a ton of QVC fitness pitches, and we got to talking about Tony, and I was like, yeah, I used to do P90X pitches on QVC with Tony, and we'd have to do one at like 2 p.m, 8 o'clock at night, and then 2 a.m. doing squats and pull-ups and all that jazz. And so, yeah, a different lifetime ago.
And now, so we talked about the MC, but what we talked about before we actually went live today was that's one of your areas, but what you've really kind of started to focus on more and more is helping people craft their story and understand what they can do for other people. And the reason that you came to mind was a week ago, Ed was talking about, he met with someone who said, you're not in the mortgage industry, you're in the dignity industry. And it is interesting how, did I say that right, Ed?
Yeah, it's close enough.
Close enough. Okay.
Yeah. I'll correct you later. It's okay.
Yeah.
Be in the show notes.
Yeah. That's what made us think of you, was you are out there wanting to help people kind of dig out their story, but then put it together in a way that actually helps them excel. Is that a fair way to say it?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you reminded me that you and I met at a Brad Sumrock event, because that's a perfect example of an industry which you really wouldn't think storytelling is a big deal, right? But I had the opportunity to not only coach Brad, but to coach his entire inner circle mastermind group of people that were raising money. They do multifamily real estate. And you think, okay, so, most people are leaning in on what's the ROI and why is this investment? And once we really got in a room with these people and started crafting a personal story that tied into their product and service, it helps you stand out in an industry so much. Like I said, when I started in fitness, the whole reason I thought what I did only worked in network marketing, only worked in fitness, right? It's the before and after, it's the personal story, it's the struggle, it's the confidence. It's not just the weight, right? It's the confidence. But then my dad, God bless my dad. So my dad has been in residential real estate for 40 plus years. At the time was a broker with Remax. And he was watching what I was doing with people online, because I was one of the first people around 07, 08 that was building that business via Facebook. Facebook by that time had just opened up to non-college students. And he said, hey, Jimmy, can you come talk to my real estate agents? And I just thought they wanted to do like a Biggest Loser challenge. I thought I was just going to go in and help a bunch of real estate agents lose weight. And he said, no, man. He's like, I watch the people you work with, and they never really talk about their product and service by name. but people flock to them and want to do business with them. And I was way too close to my gifting, like we all are, right? The things we do really well, we usually kind of like, we don't make it a big deal because we did it. And
we
so
dismiss it.
Yeah. And so I was like, well, why do I have success with this? And I was like, oh, this is just storytelling. And then once I realized that, and then I thought, well, will this work with real estate? So I started studying real estate people on social media. And I was like, they're really bad at this. It was like, all I was seeing was houses and listings and who their broker was. You know, it's like, cool, you're with Keller Williams or you're with Remax. But I'm like, I want to know who you are. And one of the things I always do specifically when I work with real estate agents, I said, look, I've watched my parents for forever. And I said, I know it's not if, but when there's going to be a hiccup in the entire transaction. You can do everything right, and somebody's late or somebody doesn't get the paperwork in. And so a lot of times when I started working with those people early on, we would find a personal story that may have nothing to do with real estate of when they were young coming up, when they did all the right things and somebody else made something challenging and how they overcame that. Or when they thought they were doing the right things and accidentally made a mistake and how they overcame that. That way, and then the art form of this is seamlessly tying that to your product and service and then reminding them, hey, you know, going back to the story and say, this is why you're going to want me in your foxhole, regardless if things go smoothly or there's a hiccup in things, because we're going to get through this. And even if you have the most analytical of backgrounds with financial advisors, mortgage guys, real estate, I've worked with scientists. If you can connect with people emotionally first, you can get to your numbers, you can get to all the facts, the figures, the ROI. People will remember and will connect with you faster and longer if you'll just take 1 to 3 minutes to connect them with a personal emotional story.
Yeah, I learned that being on radio. I got on radio in 2018, and you know, the producer was like, "This is what you want to do, and tell us a personal story about what happened." And so we're constantly have that. So till this day, I'm still on radio once a week, and we have an hour real estate. It's called Real Estate Jerky. We give you something to chew on, and it's on iHeart, you know, Power Talk 1360 all the way through. So, but what's nice about it is people got to know who I was from being on the radio, because I was private before then. I was the best kept secret.
Yeah, and now some people don't want to do that.
I'm sorry, Jimmy.
I was saying, and that's cool that you made that transition, because there's certain people that they want to stay behind the scenes, right? They don't want to be out front. And I just think if it really comes down to, at the end of the day, I feel like all of us in business at some point, the money's nice, to build things is nice, but if we really want to grow our impact with people, at some point you do have to be the guy that comes from behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz, and it's because some people don't want to be vulnerable. And I find the story most people don't want to tell is the one about them falling flat on their face. I do not enjoy getting on stage and reminding people that I was 100 pounds overweight, that I dropped out of college 3 times, and I moved back in with my parents at 22. But I have to tell all those stories because, and this goes for all 3 of us or anybody watching, if you're some professional and the only version that your audience knows is that version of you now, they may admire you, but they don't feel like they can relate with you. So we got to go back and meet them kind of where they are and let them know we understand what their pain points are, or why, you know, they're feeling vulnerable or overwhelmed or whatever, to make that connection and say, cool, let me meet you where you are, to bring you on the other side and show you how I've come through on the other side as well.
It's what they're doing right now with all the politicians, or trying to do. With the politics.
Trying to do. Yeah, I think that's probably a better sentence.
How far back you need to go to be a good politician? Well, it's not talking about what we just did. Let's talk about like years and years ago, because I haven't done anything good in the meantime. Anyway.
Since then.
So, but it's about the story, and you need to know. People want to know who you are before they're going to do business with you. And having my book come out, which, you know, has some more information in there about me and some other stuff, has helped out a lot too. So
that's absolutely it. You know,
there's a good marketing book that I read probably like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, called Trading Up. And they go through and list how all these companies were just companies, and a good example, until they started sharing their story. And Williams Sonoma is one of those. So it's pots and pans, but they put this little tag on the story of how they found that item. And, you know, it was discovered being used in Italy in this little small town. And that's why they're charging $200 for that pan. Versus if it was at Walmart, you just go, oh, okay, that looks good. And you're right, by telling the story and adding to it, you become, enamored with it. And then it's got a story you can tell your guests. And so we've seen that over time is it's not now, oh, well, I work for X. It's I work for this because of this. So I was with Janine Driver yesterday, and we're talking to a pharmaceutical company, and almost every one of their executives has had a family member affected by the solution they sell. And that was their whole story, is why they were there. And if you hear that, you're just like, because a lot of executives you hear about, well, I'm here for the bottom line, I'm here for the revenue. But their story was so amazing because they were impacted by it and want to be part of the solution to help other people not go through what they went through. And you're just talking tearjerker almost when you hear the story behind things.
And that's always the thing when I sit down with somebody and I always ask, was your story the customer's story? And if it is, that's always a great place to start. So like for me in weight loss, absolutely. Whether it was selling the products or building a network marketing company, that was kind of my first foray into business, helped me get out of debt, whatnot. So I could tell that story. But there are certain businesses where your story is not the customer's journey. So what we want to do is we want to find something that you have a story that has a similar emotional arc to what your customers are going through. I'll use an example. When I get on stage and I share my story, a bit of what I said before, and even after I lost the weight, I talk, towards the end of my keynote, it's this time I went to New York City. I did all the right things. I thought, here's the end of this story, right? This little fat kid from West Texas loses weight, gets his act together, moves to New York, and becomes famous. And I talk about 29 years old, I found myself at 6 a.m. just trying to make some extra money, passing out chocolates in a stupid outfit in Times Square, and how I'm looking at all these billboards and like, this is the way this is supposed to end. Well, my audience may have never had a weight problem, may have rocked in college, but at some point in their life, they felt like they should have been further along. They either felt like they should have been further along than they were, or they felt like they did all the right things and things still weren't working out for them. So it's not so much important that it's the details, but it's that emotional part. And as I work with people, I show them phrases on how they can tell their very unique story. They don't have to worry about it's relatable, but there are some very specific techniques that allows us to say things like, well, for me, it was this, for you, it might be. And then you're tying those things together where you can take a very unique story. In fact, one of my clients was the last guy to catch a touchdown pass from Peyton Manning. Okay, nobody else has that story. And he's like, should I even tell that story? I'm like, yeah. And so we found ways of taking us into that game and how he was down the depth chart and how that all worked out. And it was this story of perseverance and being ready instead of getting ready. And then we found ways to where it went from this very unique personal story to this very universal story that people could take away and actually take action themselves as well.
Right.
By the way, my team's the Broncos.
Benny Fowler, yeah.
Well, the question would be, I first was like, last he ever from when he was at what team? The final ever or the final?
Yeah, that Super Bowl, that last game that he played in, the Super Bowl versus the Panthers, right? That last touchdown pass, because I think that's he hung it up right after that. It's the way to go out.
Yeah, he needed to. He could barely walk.
Yeah.
Gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Damn it.
Happens all the time.
I know.
You're gonna text me the greatest question ever right after we get done here. Like, this
I was gonna bring Ed in. Okay, I remember it now. So you were talking about you have people share their failures or where they don't feel like they were a success. And Ed, you want to tell them your problem that you have with your podcast at times with guests?
They don't want to share their failures.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? And it's just an ego and pride thing. People think, and I always go back, this is a silly analogy, but it works. I always ask them, when people do that, I always ask people what their favorite movie is. And they usually are some movie, it's like, it's Rocky or it's The Wolf of Wall Street, or things where even when there's like these badass characters. And so let's say, I was like, yeah, but even let's say, any of those things, it's like that dude, whoever it was, Rambo, any Tom Cruise movie, at some point that dude got punched in the face and got knocked down. And the reason you dig him and the reason you cheer for him was because if the movie started and he's shredded and rich and has the girl, we hate that dude. Like there's nothing about that guy. We're like, F that guy, like whatever. But it's in the being vulnerable that we're going to have more people come along with us. And it's interesting. Even people clients that I work with that have a very established brand over a long time, if you can let your audience feel like they were a part of building something, man, they're way more into that. They're way more into helping to support something that still feels like it's building than something that's established. It's like when you're in college and you see that indie band that you really latch onto before they hit it big, and then they hit, then they sign the big contract and you're like, oh, you don't even know. These were my guys beforehand. And you have a different connection to them because you saw when they were struggling, or you saw when they were playing in front of 5 people. And so even if you're established, if we can take people back to that, this is what it was like when I showed up in 5 people, or my presentation, or nobody was showing up, or I was knocking doors or whatever, those people get to relive coming along with the journey and being invested in that growth piece all over again.
And if you could go back, because once they become famous, especially bands, they usually change.
Yeah.
They totally change what they did to get them there. They want to stay there, so they change. I remember in the 80s, I listened to all the, the Smiths and all those different bands. And once it became famous, they weren't the same.
Or it gets really overproduced, right?
Yeah,
it's like a big studio, and it's no longer gritty, and it has that edge that you dug about them in the first place.
Yeah, it's like Tears for Fears. Their first album is nothing like what they went when they went public.
Yeah. So Chicago, same thing. Like completely kind of changed the same. Yeah. So I think
I'm just saying. So if you can come, so you need to go back, keep your people coming with you. You got to relate back to stuff that has happened to you, so that they're still along for the ride. So they know that you're still growing, you're still trying to get bigger or do something different. And most of us go through 5-year phases where we're doing really well, and then something happens and we have to start all over again or do something differently. Not completely all over, but there's things. I mean, I just went through it myself with our illustrious interest rates. So,
yeah. And that is the thing. It's that the next mountain and the next thing. And if, the good coach or the good storyteller is reminding people, hey, we've reached this summit. Here's the next challenge. Here's the next piece. I need you to come along with me. And that goes back to telling a story. It is that Braveheart moment of rallying people that you got to remember, this is why we're here. This is why we're a big moment. And this is why I need you to come along with me. I think one of the biggest shifts I made from being an actor and a performer to a public speaker is realizing, I remind my audiences of this all the time, specifically when I'm being an MC or a host for somebody else's event, is I remind them, I was like, look, we're going to co-create this event together. As an actor, you're just performing. And I think we've all seen speakers that just talk at the audience. And because like, let's say I would go into if I would go into an audition and you guys were the guys behind the table, I wasn't allowed to use you as scene partners, right? It was usually I'd have to, perform over your heads. And something that really, it's terrifying, but once you lean into it, and I'm not talking about call and response from an audience. I'm not a huge fan of that either. But once the audience feels like you're talking with them, like one of the things I tell people is, people like, are you nervous on stage? And I said, oh yeah. When I first started auditioning, when I was still heavy, I used to have this involuntary leg shake. Like I couldn't control it getting up in front of people. I felt stupid because, people are always going to say, oh, you've always been good at this. And I'm like, no, I said, however, I still get nervous before I go on stage. And the first thing I do to ground myself is I just scan the audience quickly. And the first person that's giving me like great energy and I can tell they're already into it, I say my first line to that person. But what it does to the rest of the audience is they see that I'm actually talking with people. And all of a sudden, the rest of the audience does what I call plays up. They get involved. They lean forward as opposed to being the audience that's like back or being talked at. And it really gives us an opportunity to co-create something and create some great spontaneous moments. And it makes every time a little different. That way, again, I think we've all seen speakers where you go, oh my gosh, they've told this story so many times, they're no longer connected to it. Like they're doing their grocery list back here and they put it on autopilot in the front. But if I'm talking with you, Brian, in the audience and stuff, I'm still engaged in that moment.
Yeah, we know a lot of those people.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
We can do the presentation for them too.
Yeah,
we can just stand up and do it for them. Hey, just sit
down.
There. We'll
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's so when I was in the Navy, I started modeling and acting in San Diego. And so when I was really young, it came out in my rotary and they found my pictures. They used it for my kick out. So I became very vulnerable because they saw this stuff in me. But what I did differently this year as the president of my rotary, each meeting, I was in the audience engaging with everybody, where all the other presidents, for as long as it's been, they've been at the front, standing there behind a podium, just talking at them. I engaged them, which freaked them out because I walked everywhere throughout the whole meeting, and I would just, just step up behind somebody and it would just, and that's what you're talking about. Engage with the audience, not just talk to them.
Well, it's the Zig Ziglar versus Jim Rohn, right? Zig Ziglar worked the stage and talked to everybody that was there. Jim Rohn hid behind a podium. They both had amazing information, especially Jim Rohn, brilliant guy. But people would go see Zig 5 times over because Zig made them feel like they were part of it. Instead
Zig
of
felt like your grandpa, right? Like you were hanging out with your grandfather or something.
Yeah.
I would say one of my
being judged by Jim Rohn because he just sitting there.
And I love Jim. You're right. He was always behind a podium. One of my secrets when I go host or MC an event, before the event starts, I just did this with the Aspire Tour. So it's Orlando. I know there's going to be 5,000 people in the room, but I would go out early, and specifically like the first 3-4 rows, and just start meeting and talking with people. Hey, are you from here? Where'd you come from? And then I would make some joke. I'm like, look, I'm going to be your host the rest of the day. I was like, I need y'all to be in my corner and just laugh at bad jokes. I just make some like self-deprecating joke and just connect with them on a real level. And it makes all the difference in the world, because once I hit the stage, the hardest part for a host or an MC is that opening 5-10 minutes, right? And it's getting the audience on your side to trust you, to come along, to participate. However, the people, certain different audiences are different. There's the jump around clap audiences of network marketing companies, or there's I've been with construction guys and they don't want to interact at all. But it gives me a vibe to figure out, okay, who are these people and how can I match them to if we were sitting around and having a beer or sitting around having a cup of coffee. So it has that kind of intimacy even from the stage. But if I'll take some time, like you said, before I go on stage and kick things off, I just go make friends with the first few rows. And it's usually really apparent who's like, oh yeah, I got you. I'm in this. And then all of a sudden you kind of have a home field advantage, at least a little bit. It's like, if you remember the old Arsenio Hall show, and he's like, those people over there, he always had like the dog pound in the corner. I just go try to make my dog pound before I hit the stage.
You just need to crack a beer with those construction people beforehand.
Oh, no shit. Absolutely. Dude, I did one here that was, these 2 guys called the Real Business Owners, great dudes, but everybody in there, Brian, I think I told Brian this story. And so Ed, you're going to fit this mold. Everybody in there had facial hair and a black hat of some kind. And I walked in, and I tend to walk in. I usually do things, and I'm in a custom suit. Kind of have my Don Draper wannabe look at things. And so I don't look like anybody in there. So I had to make this joke about being the narc on stage. I'm like, and I'm the only guy with no tattoos in the room too. So no tattoos, no facial hair, and definitely not a black hat. And so I was like, I know you guys are already wondering who's the narc on the stage here. I said, guys, we only have 2 days together. You could give me the next 5 years and I'm not going to be able to grow that facial hair. No tats. I was like, but if you can get me a black hat by the time I get to the end of this, I crack some smiles. And again, trying to find common ground with just, or, is this an event where it's a big, these guys, do they cuss a lot? Do they not cuss a lot? Do they, and then you kind of figure out what is the culture of that specific audience, and then just try to go meet them there. But you're right. There's probably certain ones that if I just walked on stage and cracked a beer, I'm already on their side.
Right. Well, I've just been going to the audience and go, hey, you're on my side. Here's a beer. Have a.
It'd be better, even more so if I go pass them out. Right.
Yeah. Just take an ice chest down there with you next time. Say, hey, you want a beer? This. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's absolutely.
And it can still be, the light beer or no alcoholic. It's just the fact of doing it. You would connect with them, So.
Absolutely.
Going back to one of the things you brought up earlier, it's interesting that nobody wants to talk about what they did earlier, or they only want to cover their success and not talk about the journey, because it was Joseph Campbell who wrote the book early on, The Hero's Journey. And it's basically a blueprint for almost every television show, every movie, every book. It's somebody wants to do something more, something happened to them, they're hurt, they've got to overcome it, they come out on top, and then they may stumble back down again, and then it comes back up. I mean, you can go totally nerd on this. Star Wars, that's the whole thing, back and forth. You can go, like you said, Rambo, Rocky, you name it. So in the
Lord
Rocky
of the
movie,
Rings, it's any epic journey. It's absolutely.
Yeah.
And every sequel, it starts over something again.
Exactly.
Oh my God, we just went out. Yeah. It's like,
But
even Beverly Hills Cop 1, 2, and 3, even how bad that was still the same thing.
Yep.
And I think the people that don't want to share that, it's an ego and pride thing. It really comes back to that. And so where I always lean in, and challenging those clients that are working with me is, number one, I'm like, well, why are you working with me? Do you want to impact your audience more? What's the purpose of you bringing me in? You know, because if you're already just going to do things the way you already do them, there's no reason to come work with me. But there's usually some kind of, I want to impact more people. I want to connect on a deeper level. I want to get more clients or customers. And I'm like, any of those things, then you got to be willing to be vulnerable at least a little bit. And again,
right.
Not every great keynote or every great talk or what I call a well-crafted story has to be your worst moment. For the past 3 years, I've helped judge what's called the Great American Speak Off that Grant Cardone has done. And I've been the host and a judge for those things. And me and some of the other judges joke by the end of the day, we need a therapy session because we have heard every I died 3 times suicide story. Like, it is everybody. And I said, you know, you could connect with your audience and tell us some lighthearted something and still make a point. Like, it doesn't have to be the darkest, most depressing story either, but at least something where it's vulnerable or silly or somewhere where you messed up a little bit and came out of the other side, because that's the only time we ever relate is if you'll take a moment to show us when you're not your shiniest or you aren't your most perfect.
Mm-hmm. You said, so, you're not going to keep going.
I feel I don't want to interrupt you, Ed. I thought you were going to say something.
Start talking, did I? I interrupt you all the time.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting because the last we're coming on a year and a half of doing this, Ed. Watching social media that's one of the things too. Is watch like the Ryan Majin people. It's what's capturing the most people's attention right now on Reels and everything else is somebody interviewing someone else. And the reason why that's so good is because the person interviewing asks questions that you wouldn't think to ask yourself. And I see the same way with you is, yes, there's Chat GPT. Yes, there's ways to improve what you think, but you need to get someone else's perspective to ask you questions about your story that you just bypass or that you don't think is important. And that's why people come to someone like you is they think they have their story, but that's the story they want to tell, but that's not the story people want to hear or need to hear. And so going to that third party person is almost like going to a therapist where you want to get your message out, but you need help with it being pulled out of you. Is that kind of what you do?
Absolutely. Or some people don't think their story is big enough. They have a great story. Yeah. I remember one time I had a client who she was a health and fitness coach. And she's like, Jimmy, I know I was called to help women with their health and fitness journey. She's like, I just need to lose 30 more pounds before I launch because I've only lost 20 pounds and I really don't work out very consistently. And I was like, wait, pause. I was like, say that again. And she kind of repeated that. She's like, oh yeah, I know what I'm supposed to do. I want to impact these women. She felt like she needed to lose 30 more pounds to validate herself because she'd only lost 20 and she doesn't really work out. I told her, I was like, do you realize you're a rock star to the woman that's been like sitting on the couch thinking about doing something that 20 pounds to somebody else could change their lives right now? And I've seen that over and over again. And even in my own life, when I shifted from strictly health and fitness to doing what I do now, I'm like, there's a lot of people out there that are teaching storytelling or helping writing people's keynotes. And so I thought, oh, I have to wait till I have this, and this resume or this size audience. Cause I just assumed, oh, well, they're going to go. I remember when I first started using the story, the number one question was like, have you heard of Donald Miller? I'm like, yeah, I'm super familiar with Donald Miller. And so I just was always like, oh, everybody's going to go see Donald Miller or Bo Eason or Michael Porter. Most of these people I've worked with or are friends of mine until I realized, oh, not necessarily, because there are things about each of us that somebody's going to specifically relate with us more. And a lot of times the other thing is, we know all the experts in our industry because we live inside that bubble. And there are people that still have no idea. I ran into somebody the other day that still didn't know who Tony Robbins was. And I was like, okay. And I was like, if you don't know who Tony Robbins is, then that's just proof that I bet they don't know half the people that are writing keynotes or speaking coaches or story coaches or whatever you want to label me out there. So I might as well continue to share my story because there are people that will resonate with me. And I tell my clients this all the time. There are people that would rather resonate with you because they have more access or it's a more of a boutique experience than going with whoever you consider the big dog in your industry that they're never going to have access to, that they're going to have to talk to that person's coach or they're only going to be able to read a book. And it's just like, cool, then you just robbed somebody from having an experience of changing their life because you made an assumption that your story wasn't big enough or that they were going to automatically want to go with somebody else in your industry?
Well, first part of that, I mean, what, they've never seen Shallow Hal? I mean, come on, at least then you know who Tony Robbins.
No, I never have.
I'm not your guru on Netflix, but
on Netflix, yeah. I just use him as an example because I feel like, you know, in that business space, okay, what's a name everybody knows? And I'm like, okay, if that person exists, then that goes for any industry.
100%.
But he actually has taken down what he used to be on TV all the time. He's not on TV.
Those infomercials and stuff, yeah.
But that all changed after he got sued. So, you know, and then because he used to have Castle Del Mar down in San Diego where he used to live in, and that all changed in the 90s. So there's a lot of people in 90s on who have no idea where he is.
And I just make that point to say, look, your story is big enough, right? People always think, I always say, you know, it's not, you know, 50 pounds or $50,000 later that you should start sharing your story. You need to start sharing it now and bring people along. Again, going back to that idea of people like to be a part of building things, even if you don't have the back end results. If you share a story and say, hey, and now I've made it to my mission to help X number of people or to move in this direction, I would love for you to be a part of this movement. There are people that will come along. It's not like you don't have to be established or have this huge track record to already start serving your audience or really helping people, you know, change their lives. Whether that's, you know, you said something about it being dignity. For me, you know, health and fitness wasn't about a number. It was about confidence. I used to always say in my trainings, you know, we don't sell health and fitness. We don't sell in-home business. We deliver hope to a world that desperately needs it. You know, it was this idea of not necessarily what the actual again, selling houses. It's not necessarily the brick and mortar that someone's living in. It's security, it's family, it's memories. That's really, you know, again, it goes back to connecting on a more emotional level than just strictly the analytical side of things.
Going back to one of the things you said, I don't want to bypass this. You don't always have to look at the big successful people. So I'll speak from personal experience. When I got started, I thought, oh, there's no way I'll ever be Brad Lee. But then I found, don't try to be Bradley, because you don't see the 20 years that he's been working on stuff. Instead, find somebody who's slightly higher than you are, follow their lead, do what they're doing. And for me, that was Neil Holmes. If you've ever seen his Instagram account, he got hacked, had to go back to zero. And 2 years later, he was doing I think it's called the Forward event is the one that he does. Let me see what his is called. Yeah, the Forward event. And so his whole thing, I looked at him and I thought, wow, that's neat that somebody who lost everything and had to start all over with social media. Yes, people will find him, but I looked at somebody who was there versus looking at people who are way up on the mountaintop. And so just look for somebody who's slightly better than you that you're trying to catch up to, and then you pick another person if you outgrow that one. And to your point, you get more access to people who are newer than people who are way up there. There's a certain person that will come in and speak in an event. They charge for every photo that someone can take, and they literally come in, speak, take the X amount of photos and leave, and nobody can interact with them at all. Yeah. And so you can pay a lot to have a picture with someone, or you can invest in someone who's growing to help you be more hands-on and work with you and things. So
absolutely, because you'd much rather have the emotional interaction with somebody than just a photo.
Right.
Jimmy, he was talking about himself. That's what he
said.
That's right. It was the Burt Reynolds photo too, so I just lay and they'd come and take a picture.
When do you take your hat off?
Yeah. But okay. Right. So I know that one of the ways that they can reach you is here at your website, thecoachjimmy.com. And we were talking also, so what is it that is the first way that you really start to help people with figuring this out?
So what I put together is people, you know, I come on podcast, things like this, and I know I spew a lot of here's a strategy, it can be overwhelming. It's a little like, you know, drinking out of a fire hydrant. So if they just go to storywellcrafted.com, I've done a couple things. There's a checklist of a lot of the things that we've talked about today. The second part on there is what I call the story memory jogger. And it's something I take every new client through. And you think these stories are insignificant. So it's questions like, tell me about your worst date. Tell me about your first car. It gets people out of just this linear, I can only tell this story. And it kind of gets your brain rolling. And I know I went through something like that early on because the story I start my keynotes with is about me singing on stage as a fat kid in stupid pajamas in the first grade in West Texas. It was because somebody took me through a memory jogger, and then I was like, oh, and I realized how it tied in to what I do now. And so really, yeah, right there, just storywellcrafted.com. There's an entire checklist plus the memory jogger, and that'll at least just get you started on the journey of figuring out, do I have a story? The answer is yes, but it helps you realize you do. What are some of the elements you need to do that? And then how to tie that to your business, even if you feel like there's no connection.
Awesome.
Jimmy, thanks for being on the show today.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. I hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah. And Ed, when you come to Dallas, you can go out with Jimmy and I, because he actually lives close by here, but it's bad. We get out and we go start drinking old fashions and bad shit happens. So
yeah, I also co-host a Texas whiskey show. That's a whole different, that's an episode. Those are conversations for another day.
Yeah, I do. I will share one last funny story on the way out. So Jimmy calls me the other day. He's like, so do you have my credit card? Because we both have Amexes that are similar, but mine has designs on it. We didn't realize when we went out drinking the other day that the bartender gave us the wrong one back. And I'm getting ready to leave the country. Thankfully, he caught on to it because I never even looked at my card. I just pulled it out, paid for gas and whatever. And yeah, we had each other's cards. So
yeah, I didn't want a bunch of Europe tags all of a sudden on my credit cards. I'm glad we caught that one.
Damn it. I'm not. I would have charged up way
more.
more.
Caught on.
Right. I guess I'd have got all the points. The silver
Yeah,
line.
exactly. All right.
No,
Jimmy.
thank you guys for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Ed, you want to take us out?
Sure. What the heck? Why not? You do such a horrible job at it.
I do. I do it on purpose to make you feel important.
Yeah, it's like when your ex-wife asked you to clean the house, you did a shitty job, so you wouldn't clean the house anymore.
You got cameras in here?
Talking to your other house. Yeah.
Okay.
You do the job so bad that they stop asking you to do it.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, everybody. I appreciate you both being here today. I appreciate you for being here. If you want to support us, the best thing you can do is just subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, we're here every Tuesdays and Thursdays at what is that, 10 a.m. Pacific and noon Central?
Yes, noon Central. The important time.
Yeah, the important time. All right. We'll see you next week. Thank you both for being here. I appreciate you both. Thank you.
Thanks,